decreasing the salaries and the well-being of the people.
Europe is going through a very difficult time.
Europe is actually overly dependent on the US.
This must be Europe's independence moment.
On a vu que le parapluie américain.
Europe needs to find partners today.
Europe, a continent, an economic zone, a form of lifestyle, and origin of modern science.
Vous savez, les vieilles puissances, les vieilles...
You know, the old powers, the old Western countries have, as they say, rested on their laurels a little bit.
It seems to be in trouble. Development stalled.
Europe is going through a very difficult time, and I think it will require patience and a lot of work.
Europe was once a highly innovative and dynamic region. However, since the advent of the new Industrial Revolution, Europe has seen a decline in innovation.
And it has been geopolitically challenged.
I think that the Europeans have been challenged both by the United States and by Russia in a way that we have not seen since maybe before World War II.
Energy crisis is one. The rising cost of production has driven many industries to the edge. Energy prices have soared since the start of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and electricity is now 2 to 4 times more expensive than in the United States. This has created multiple challenges for industrial production as well as people's everyday lives.
The crude oil market will face challenges as U.S. sanctions against Russia bring new challenges to energy supplies in Central European countries.
All of this has lifted costs across the board, worsening finance conditions and driving companies out, leading to job cuts. The EU's strategic stance has damaged its economy. The conflict in Ukraine has been particularly worrying for EU, and the bloc has been relying heavily on the US for security. But since US President Donald Trump took office, that has started to change.
Aujourd'hui, je crois qu'il faut se rendre à l'idée que
Today, I believe we must accept that the United States, at least under President Trump's administration, will prioritize its own interests. We are compelled to find a way to compensate for this future absence of an American defense umbrella.
cette future absence de parapluie américain.
Now is the EU's turn to deal with the effects of American policy. Europe has to accept that its most important alliance is on the rocks.
We do indeed need to focus on building a Europe that understands that the relationships between allies and the alliances of the post-World War II era have changed. We already know that Europe and the United States do not share the same vision of the international order.
Some observers say the EU is in a bind, directly as a result of this overdependence.
Europe is actually overly dependent on the US, and what it fears most is being abandoned by America.
And now the EU has decided to take it as an opportunity rather than a challenge.
If Europe wants its place and be accepted, it must engage in power struggle.
European leaders have been calling for more strategic autonomy, both in defense and strategy.
This must be Europe's independence moment. I believe this is our union's mission, to be able to take care of our own defense and security.
But how?
This year, we have done more for defense than in the last decades. Over the last 10 years, we invested 8 billion euros in the defense fund. This year, we enabled up to 800 billion euros of investment till 2030.
The Brussels-based think tank Bruegel has estimated that defending Europe without the US would need the EU to find 300,000 more troops, an additional 250 billion euros of defense spending. That is 170% of what EU currently spends, and equivalent to 3.5% of the bloc's GDP.
We are moving mountains. After decades of underinvestment, we are turning a corner. We're transforming our defense industrial base into one that can deliver cutting-edge technologies and fast mass production in the cauldron of war.
But more money by itself is not enough. The bloc also needs to boost its defense industrial capacity.
One hurdle that we must overcome is joint procurement. Economies at scale can help our industries to ramp up production and also lower costs for our countries.
The EU has committed itself to providing for its own defense and reaching strategic independence, now that the US considers its close ally to be an economic underperformer that is unable to defend itself. Fearing for its future, the EU has been looking for alternative partners to prepare for a new geopolitical reality.
L'Europe a besoin aujourd'hui de trouver des partenaires.
Europe needs to find partners today. We have seen that the American defense umbrella will no longer work.
Ne fonctionnerait plus.
The world faces fragmentation and geopolitical tensions.
China and Europe share many commonalities.
We can really rebuild trend for an increasing cooperation.
Density of very good companies, China is unbeatable.
But Rome was not built in a day. Alternative and compatible partnerships takes time, effort, and trust to build, especially for powers with comparable size, sway, and vision.
China and Europe together, they make more than 1/3 of all world trade. And you have to take the decision. Do we follow United States? So Europe alone, China alone, everybody alone, and will be a disaster for mankind.
Global issues need global solutions.
China and Europe share many commonalities. How to construct this international order is something I think neither the United States nor China alone can build. And even Europe would find it difficult. It requires cooperation among large power blocs.
Trump is challenging basically everything because no one can predict today what he will say tomorrow. And tomorrow he will say something different from the day after. And that creates a huge challenge.
Rising protectionism also risks derailing the multilateral trading system as we know it today.
Over the past decades, globalization has connected our economies and lifted millions out of poverty. Today, however, the world faces fragmentation and geopolitical tensions that slow innovation and risk the green transition.
Losing this stability could have grave consequences, as history has proven.
We have the moral and political and economic obligation to start cooperation, because otherwise we shall build a world crisis like it was in 1929.
With the US withdrawal leaving a power vacuum, China and EU countries are coming together to form an anchor of stability for the world.
And if we together, China and Europe, we could agree on peace guarantees, respect and strengthening of international organizations to solve the global problems like climate change or regulations of artificial intelligence, then we are on the right track.
China and Europe could be the key.
Europe-Chinese relations is the key to stabilize the world in this disarray in two ways. We need to stabilize the political system with predictable rules for what is acceptable and non-acceptable behavior, and finding ways to resolve the major crises like Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar, Gaza, and more. Without European-Chinese cooperation, it's very hard to see how we can create these stable global governance.
For the smaller actors, and this includes the European Union, it is a very difficult situation right now because they rely on a rules-based order, on multilateralism, also on free trade, on existing cooperation mechanisms.
We see a very strong commitment from both sides, the new German government and the Chinese leadership, towards multilateralism. This is what we need.
And small sparks can develop into big fires.
we can really rebuild the trend for an increasing cooperation in the world.
Some say China could potentially do even more.
I think China could work with members of the European Union to provide more incentive to develop their policies, develop their strategy in a way that's not just the United States and Russia.
And Europe is hoping to diversify its global partnerships given the current state of ties with the US.
We need to double down on diversification and on partnerships. 80% of our trade is with countries other than the United States. So we need to capitalize now on these new opportunities.
Whatever the state of its alliances, the EU retains enormous potential. It has admired the world over for its economic strength, but also as a lifestyle and technological powerhouse. It's the world's biggest single market and largest trading bloc, with 2/5 of global trade being conducted in euros. The influence of Europe's rich heritage can be seen everywhere in the modern world and continues to define rules and standards across the globe. From manufacturing to medicine to aerospace, the EU remains a force to be reckoned with.
Europe is indeed the birthplace of modern science, right? You could say that, but after World War II, the centre shifted from Europe to the United States, while Europe is also developing quite well. So I think strengthening cooperation with Europe has great potential.
I think that fascinating new inventions, new ideas, new science and research will come up in medicine, in technology, etc.
While Europe is developing, China is also growing at an astonishing speed.
You sum up all the fantastic progress of China in the last years.
China's development has been incredibly rapid. Everything is happening at a breakneck pace. Now China places even greater emphasis on the quality of development. This aspect in particular has left a deep impression on me.
In 1980, China's per capita GDP ranked 169th globally. In 2024, the UN's World Intellectual Property Organization ranked China the 8th globally in high-impact science.
So there are more patents now being in the last 20 years registered in China than in the US. There are about 1.6 million in China, about 500,000 in the US.
China is ahead of Europe. China started to become this power in 2015, 2016. It's 10 years development, investing heavily in high-tech, artificial intelligence, renewable energies, and so on.
That technological progress is likely to continue.
The quantity and the quality level of the industry in China has no comparison in the world.
For investors, that translates into more companies worth investing in.
I would say, compared to many other markets, the density of very good companies, China is unbeatable. It's way far, like many more companies that are like in the upper quality range of good investable companies.
Many believe national-level planning combined with an efficient market are China's secret recipe.
You've had these 5-year plans, right? I mean, you made these plans, and then you stuck to them.
It's 10 years. China did a plan. Also, this is the main point, the capacity to plan the economy.
China has decided to become an entrepreneurial and innovation-driven. I think that is the key. On the foundations of economic dynamism, China is a great example.
I think it comes down to hard work. I mean, when there's scale and volume of hard workers, you get results. And there's not that many other places in the world where you have that.
China's rapid development, expanding impact create potential for scientific and green cooperation.
Science is science. So atoms are atoms, molecules are molecules.
The green transition can only succeed a global mission.
This transformation is central to our push for independence.
Science, the engine for growth, carries tremendous potential for international cooperation. China-EU scientific cooperation has witnessed drastic changes throughout its history.
Probably 30 years ago, international cooperation was more one way. So Western scientists, because they had the research infrastructure, the long history, they would come and they would perhaps be mainly helping Chinese scientists, or Chinese scientists go abroad to do PhDs or postdocs. But now it's completely a two-way street. So we collaborate with people in top universities worldwide, in Oxford and Cambridge in the UK.
It's time to make a great cooperation of students, professors, scientists, researchers between Europe and China.
For example, inviting some foreign experts to come in, or given that our country's economy is quite strong, hiring some foreign experts to study and work in China. At the same time, it will also provide certain assistance to our young people and scientific workers.
And we will make America great again.
The political climate is also conducive for global mobility of talents. Trump has proposed to cut half of the National Science Foundation's funding, and had in 2025 cut around $2 billion. As funding for research was slashed dramatically, some scientists are considering leaving the States. Meanwhile, the European Union announced €500 million incentives to lure international academics to the continent.
The United States government decided to put a taxation against the immigration of high-tech scientists. In the same moment, Xi Jinping has made incentive to the entrance of scientists.
And Europe is also seeking to attract talents and support scientific development.
Science has no passport, no gender, no ethnicity, and no political color. It is one of the most valuable global goods. And this is why the Commission announced the Choose Europe package of €500 million to attract and retain the best scientists and researchers.
I've had contact with some European countries, and they generally agree with the idea of science without borders and the essentiality of international cooperation. They also strongly disagree with the policies of the United States. Therefore, I believe there is a good possibility of cooperation.
Many believe that science has a higher chance of transcending those hurdles.
There are a lot of challenges to be overcome, but I think that scientists maybe have a higher chance, because science is science. So atoms are atoms, molecules are molecules, wherever you are, whatever your political situation is. So hopefully it makes cooperation, collaboration a little easier than in some other areas.
That spirit could be applied elsewhere, if not just in science.
In my opinion, it's more cooperation than ever, because like if I speak to scholars in Europe and see how much exchange they have with scholars in China, it's more than ever. And I've been in this field for a decade and a half now, and it wasn't this much integration if you go back 5 years or 10 years or 15 years ago. So I think communication and exchange is higher than ever.
Apart from scientific cooperation, the green transition may also bear potential, where Europe is a frontrunner.
Already today, low-carbon sources account for over 70% of our electricity. This is the power of the European Green Deal, and we must stay the course on our climate and environmental goals.
And no country can do this alone.
The green transition can only succeed a global mission. No country or continent can reach carbon neutrality alone.
China is also a major player in this field.
China has become a global leader. Its clean energy industry has overrepresented a significant share of its economy and play a central role in global supply chains.
The United States and Europe, I think, had at various points tried to be leaders in green development, and today they're turning more inward. So I think China has not only a great opportunity, but a great responsibility on the world stage to help scale green development.
China was not seen from the European side as a real competitor up to 5-10 years ago.
The old powers, the old Western countries have, as they say, rested on their laurels a little bit.
Our trading relationship with the United States is our most important.
The European Union will prefer to choose the United States.
We should not let our relationship be defined by third parties.
But there is a new reality that is taking time to sink in. China's rapid catch-up has altered dynamics, stirring fear of missing out.
The perspective on who is learning from whom has been dramatically changing. And if you take technology, well, we, Germans, made in Germany, we were used to have the technology for the rest of the world. And all of a sudden we are realizing when it comes to modern technologies like artificial intelligence and robotics, China is the leading power in the world. Believe me, for most of our politicians, especially those, the vast majority, who knows almost nothing about China, this comes as a shock.
That creates insecurity in traditional industrial powers.
It's clear that China is at the forefront of a number of technologies. There's a fear, for example, regarding the economic and automotive industries. There's a fear in France. Today, I think we are a little bit behind in these areas, and there is artificial intelligence, which will be a very big topic tomorrow. And I think that France fears in this area that it has fallen a little behind China and the United States.
But this insecurity is new.
China was not seen from the European side as a real competitor up to 5-10 years ago. So the relationship was better because China was not so big and so important. So we started, not we, I mean the European governments started to see China as a danger. Why? Because Chinese development was so evident, and Europe was not able to catch up. Not only Europe, but also the United States.
Some say Europe could do better.
I find some of the policies and the strategy puzzling from the European Union. I find a lack of strategy, which is surprising given the development, the extraordinary intellectual scholarship and innovation that we've seen from Europe.
European countries are reflecting.
It must be acknowledged that China has progressed faster than we have. You know, the old powers, the old Western countries have, as they say, rested on their laurels a little bit.
And when industries are at risk, divergent objectives could clash.
If you look at China's new energy sector, that represents the green industry, right? But when it affects Europe's domestic industries, the continent shows a completely different stance.
It is hard for Europe to steer its course away from decades of dependence on the US.
We have always been linked, and we are still friends of the United States in some way, and we are linked to the United States economy.
Our trading relationship with the United States is our most important. We export over 500 billion euros worth of goods every year. Millions of jobs depend on it.
That emotional and economic connection runs decades, if not centennials back.
The United States did indeed help Europe recover through the Marshall Plan, which was commendable. However, the US also controlled Europe through the NATO alliance. This control has led to the current situation for Europeans.
But the EU is well aware that what once was can no longer stay the same.
Europe's independence will depend on its ability to compete in today's turbulent times. We have everything it takes to thrive here in Europe, from our single market to our social market economy.
So the question posed to Europe is twofold. On one hand, it is a long-term friend and ally with which ties have spoiled. On another, an emerging economy presents opportunities, yet is still distant and unfamiliar.
China is a very distant country for France. When I was a child, China was a dream, something out of reach. It was a very distant country. We thought we were so different.
For the EU, it's hard to pick between China and the US.
Firstly, we need to look at this background of this, a complicated gaming between China, the EU, and the United States on trade, investment, or some other economic issue. Certainly, the European Union will prefer to choose the United States as a priority to deal with frictions or some other issues with Washington. But at the same time, as we know, because of the Trump administration, so the European Union so far has a lot of suspicion about the future or the tendency of American policy towards Europe. So it's very difficult for the European Union to make a clear choice between China and the US.
Europeans think a relation not defined by a third country is possible.
We are fully committed to the Chinese market. We have a strong belief in the long-term potential of the market. There is always an impact of external factors, but I think it's even more important that we should not let our relationship be defined by a third party. We look at the relationship on its own merits and try to find a way forward.
China and Europe, we have never been enemies, but we have never been brothers. And this is the moment in which history obliges us to change.
And perhaps ties can advance into being equal partners and almost brothers.
Today, China is considered an equal partner.
And this is our job, to pass from, let's say, a relation that is not good and not bad, to a relation to be at least almost brothers.
If you look at the world like a hammer, and you see everything is in news.
It's better to focus on practical purposes and real work.
They must see this rise as an opportunity and share in its benefits.
This is our challenge for the future.
Despite room for improvement, the case for cooperation is still strong.
I think I'm optimistic. I think in the end, sense prevails.
Importantly, tech integration cannot operate with a fragmented supply chain.
We have already seen a trend amongst our members in the chamber that supply chains are becoming more siloed, that you have separate supply chains for increasingly for China and for the rest of the world, or US specific and China specific. This is something that adds costs for our members, and it's something that ultimately is going to get passed on to consumers.
Our task is to replace fragmentation with smart cooperation to build resilient, mutual beneficial connections that support the next generation of technologies.
De-risking, as it's called, could actually be the biggest risk, shedding away integration opportunities with rapidly growing Chinese industries. Staying in China is a contested strategic move, but one with returns likely to materialize.
There's been geopolitical tensions every decade as long as you can remember. Therefore, I don't think that is worthy of changing your decision-making upon that. I think it's better to focus on practical purposes and real work instead of getting blinded by headlines and different other rumors and shakes. It's more important to have a longer vision and a longer commitment to your purpose.
Some stay with a longer vision, and some fold, seeing uncertainty.
We have seen it as a clear clear trend here in China that maybe 20-25% of our member companies have moved part or the entirety of their supply chains out of China. But at the same time, we see an equal number of companies actually increasing their onshoring of activities in China, vertically integrating their supply chains in China.
Integrating supply chains, sharing benefits, and engage in healthy competition that drives innovation.
European leaders must confront the fact that China is rising, and they must see this rise as an opportunity and share in its benefits.
And a mindset shift could well be useful.
China views Europe always as a very important partner, even a partner in comprehensive meaning. But in return, Europe is now viewing China as competitor, but mainly as a systemic rival. And so there is a saying, if you look at the world like a hammer, and you see everything is in news.
Although there is a misalignment in how both sides see each other, one thing is certain: an environment that fosters competitiveness is good for the long term.
We think that the world has benefited tremendously in the past from the free transfer of capital, of human resources, of technology, of research and development. And it would be a pity for everyone and lead to growth below potential if suddenly we are beginning to operate in separate silos.
But can we maintain the positive side of globalization and make lasting gains?
If we don't stick together, cooperating, the world economy will go into a certain depression.
I think that's very important for China and Europe and to learn more from each other at a very optimistic basis. That's the only way to survive. Otherwise, the world will be so divided and it will be self-destroying. The politicians in Europe, in China, and everywhere in the world, they should be aware of this responsibility.
And perhaps we're not that different at the end of the day.
We're not so different after all, and perhaps we can have a vision, not equivalent, but viewed in the same direction when it comes to international politics.
I'm optimistic. I think in the end, sense prevails.
And whether sense will ultimately prevail, the future is always in our hands.
Now, China and Europe are the biggest player in the world trade and in the world economy. And we have to decide whether we can cooperate, and that is our challenge for the future.
Divisions, deglobalization, trade fragmentation, and technological rivalry. In a world grappled with its undercurrents, where do we sail from here? In a brand new reality where the old is no longer granted and the new has yet to be built, how do we reorient ourselves and re-identify with others? Looking forward, for Europe, the options are always there.